Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fired Up, the podcast for marketers working in early and late stage startups. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintock, and today I'm joined by Nicole Pytel. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Morgan.
And Chris Ulbrich.
Hello there.
So today we are going to talk all about the biggest tech marketing stories of 2025. Let's take a look back through the year and just unpack some of the big stories and their sort of implications for us as we go into 2026. I think all of these are going to relate some way to AI. So, in many ways, there's one story, it's AI, and we're going to ladder all of them up. Why don't we cast your mind back to June, Apple launching Apple Intelligence across all of its major things. When we talk about AI, the one name that's missing is Apple, but they have got a product, Apple Intelligence. What do you think about this one, Chris?
Well, I mean, famously, it's a flop, right? It's just there at the beginning of this month, the head of Apple Intelligence left. It's clear that Apple is having trouble getting Siri up to par with other assistants and getting its integration with Apple products to get actions synced up with speech. And so it's incredible. I'm far from the first to note this, that the distance between the conversation that you can have with a ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and the sort of the easy give and take with those experiences, you feel like, okay, you're not talking to a human, but you're talking to something that can answer you like it understands what you need. Siri is still so very primitive by comparison, and Apple basically acknowledged this by shoving in an integration with ChatGPT into Apple Intelligence now. So now, if it detects that you're trying to do something that it clearly cannot accomplish with Siri, it says, well, do you want to run that with ChatGPT? I think this is in some ways most interesting and important insofar as it reflects the real ongoing challenges of making agents work in the real world. And that's a problem that a lot of our clients are grappling with. It's a lot easier to get it to work purely in software than in a software hardware device where Apple does have a difficult problem there that it's trying to crack. And even so, it's probably behind companies like Microsoft and Google. But, Apple's struggles are in some ways the industry struggles writ large, because in addition to AI being the big story of the year, agents in the world of enterprise technology, agents were the story of the year.
Absolutely. If you cast your mind back to January, every company in that phase was trying to add agentic to their website and to all their messaging, I think through the whole of Q1, even when I would sort of define an agent as you give it some instructions and it takes multiple steps to do it, and it sort of works out how to get to the objective on its own. When they didn't have all of that, this agentic layer came in. And I think you see that in all the content that we're producing. You see it in a lot of media. You see companies are still launching agents where it's not too late. We're still launching agents, right? And I think the media is perhaps getting a bit tired of that. But yeah, when we say it's been a year of AI, it's really been the year of agentic AI.
It has. And I think there's a lot of pressure on marketers. I just see, on LinkedIn with colleagues and stuff, everybody wants to adopt an agent. They want to be on the cutting edge. They want to say, I'm using agentic AI, but they don't totally know how to do that or how to start or how do you build one and what can it do for you and what can it orchestrate? And to your point, Morgan, there are kind of more simplistic agent ways of using AI, but I think the true, hey, AI, go do these 12 things without any input from me and let me know what you find out. I don't think marketers have figured out how to do that. And I think part of it's a lack of time, could be a lack of resources, but I feel like there's this peer pressure that we should all have agents just kind of swarming around, and they're not.
That's right. And I think that the industry, again, writ large, has grudgingly admitted that a lot of you're hearing more and more voices acknowledge that the marketing of AI agents has gotten ahead of the reality. And that's not to say that the AI we have can't do remarkable things. It's just the kind of totally unsupervised use case that you described, Nicole, is probably further out than a lot of companies are representing. So that is a challenge for us as marketers because we have a lot of clients who are working in the agentic field and they're making claims for their technology. And, part of what we're doing every day is helping them make sure that those claims are connected to the real experience that users are going to have. And they're under, especially startups, they're under so much pressure to plant a flag on territory their competitors haven't already. And there's a constant temptation to claim abilities that in reality, they might not be able to deliver just yet. But then the feeling is, well, if someone was interested in that, we're pretty confident we could develop it. And, we hear that a fair bit. And it's a reasonable and well-established strategy for startups. There is in any fast-growing business, there's an element of fake it till you make it. Fair. But it's sort of interesting to see an economy the size of the AI economy operating on those principles. This isn't just a startup phenomenon. This is arguably the underpinnings of the entire economy as we have it now are operating on this.
The US economy, that's right. The stock market valuations are pinned on these agents or AI and ergo these agenting.
That's right. We've seen a number of economists point out how if you subtract AI spending from the stock market growth, for instance, there's not a lot of growth in the economy except AI. There's a lot riding on these claims. I said to a client just a couple of days ago, if you look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal, not every story, but like 65% of the stories are one form or another of, is this economy sustainable? Is the AI economy sustainable? Is this going to work? It touches everything from hiring to pricing to electrical prices. Famously, one of the big sort of infrastructure stories of this year has been this huge data center build out going on across the country, how that's affecting electricity prices in places like Ohio. It's really an open question. Environmental consultants will say that it's not entirely clear that all of these data centers are going to have the electricity they need to power themselves, and that utilities are promising the same electricity to different data center managers. And so when we think about the question, can Siri find like a line in the podcast that I want to jump to? That feels like a very small targeted question, but in a way, if you multiply that task out to all the things people want to do with AI, you are arguably asking the question, is this economy going to sustain itself?
Can it really deliver here? I mean, I will say for, in Apple's defense, I like the name Apple Intelligence. It's not a marketing genius to kind of like great branding. If you bought your new MacBook this year, it's powered by Apple Intelligence, or your new phone, they're using it to drive hardware sales. The promise of it isn't particularly there because one of the first things you do is turn Siri off because, she's not doing anything. And so that's a challenge for such a major vendor here. But yeah, if you've actually tried to build an agent yourself, which I've done a number of times, even to do something fairly basic on one of these sort of platforms, we're not there yet, right? It's a good path to being very frustrating.
The flip side of this is that we've been talking so far about the limitations of AI and maybe the distance between what they can do and what they can't do. But I feel like this year, the world really they got their arms around what AI really could do and some of the astonishing things that it does make possible. And this, I'm talking well beyond just making a deep fake video or all the sort of the fun, weird use cases that everybody tried out when AI first emerged. But you, Morgan, you coded some very credible applications for the agency.
Right.
And I know that you're not a complete neophyte with technology, but I was astonished at how quickly you were able to create a new timesheet app for us, a multifaceted timesheet app. And so like AI, this stuff works.
It's been brilliant. And I would say that it is kind of like, when sufficiently advanced technology is akin to magic, it is kind of magical when you're like, hey, we're going to build this. I type in an outcomes, some applications that we're using for our, we're running an agency. So we have people and we need to allocate time and we need to price our work and all that kind of stuff. These small apps that have been living in spreadsheets that have been disjointed, we've now replaced with custom app that I did in Lovable. Great product. I am not a coder, and I've been managed to do this in quite a short period of time, or sort of almost in contrast to my agent experience where I'm trying to do some fairly basic tasks. This is just brilliant. And so then you'll start to think, okay, what can I productize? And, we're taking some cost out of the business by, hey, I don't need to renew the timesheet platform. So yeah, I agree with you. That stuff has been great. And so I am excited about when they get the agent things dialed in,
right?
It should take away a lot of repeatable low-level tasks.
I was just recently experimenting with some multi-step analysis and production with ChatGPT based on internal data on the web. And my first experiments with LLMs found them to be highly error prone, not trustworthy. It took longer to check what they did than it did to do it yourself. And I was pleasantly surprised with ChatGPT 5.1 how far it had come in terms of reliability. And to be clear, I'm using AI every day. I was checking back in with its ability to do a really complicated task. And I did try the deep research and the agentic functionality, but it was doing fine even without it. And so it feels to me like this year we started to see the impact of AI that isn't just sort of dazzling, but reliable and useful for everyday tasks. You still have to build in a certain amount of skepticism and error checking into your workflow. And I think we're all getting kind of used to the idea that Google, now when it front loads AI answers, it's going to be wrong more often than it used to be. But it's also right enough of like AI is able to guide you through an oil change, or it will guide you through fixing your computer. Copilot was just advertising that capability.
I've done it. I used it to fix my dishwasher.
It works pretty darn well. It's not perfect, but I think it might this year have gotten over the hump of usability. It's no longer just a toy. It's something that you can rely on day to day. Now, that's a mixed blessing for marketers, especially on the PR side, because that has implications for the media landscape as well. I mean, one of the unhappier developments we saw this year was the even more rapid than usual contraction of the media, specifically at TechCrunch, which has been a mainstay for our clients and for the startup ecosystem in general. And I think that it's not entirely related to AI, but it does feel like the overall pullback in the economy, what's been referred to as this white collar recession, is hitting journalism as well. And that white collar recession is often attributed in part to the influence of AI, companies being unwilling to hire until they can figure out what processes they can automate. So whether there's a direct impact on, say, TechCrunch or not, I couldn't say, but it does feel like part of the same general phenomenon. And the impact on our clients has been profound.
Yeah. TechCrunch has definitely gone through the mix, having been acquired by a PE company back in March of its staff turnover. And, they've staffing back up again, but it's not the investigative beating heart that it once, which is a shame. I mean, it's still on the list of publications, aspirant publications that startups want to get into, but its readership has gone down. And it's just ability to cover the beats of Silicon Valley's news is not there at the moment. And let's hope that they recover again in 2026. It's been a tough year for that publication. Partly driven by one of the trends, Nicole, this zero-click search this year. Google rolled out, it was called SGE, Search Generative Experience, cast your mind back. We could just about see it. And now everyone's got it and everybody's using it. and no one's coming to your website anymore.
Yeah. I mean, if I had a dime for every time a client mentioned zero-click behavior, I would be on an island with a pina colada somewhere. But I remember the days when you just typed random keywords into Google, and it was kind of amazing to be able to type in a question and get search results. And now Google really is an answer engine. It's not just a search engine. Like, you ask it, sometimes the answers are not right, but it will give you answers, and you don't need to go visit a website, which has totally transformed life for our clients and for us as well. A lot of explanation on our part. Well, why did traffic drop? Why did this happen? Why did that? And, setting those expectations of, it's not just you, it's the entire internet that isn't getting traffic anymore. What we are seeing with clients, and it's interesting, is that when people do get to the website, they're much further down in the funnel than they used to be. Those basic questions, those very top of funnel, that very educational, like how to fix my dishwasher, Morgan, that's being answered by AI. And folks are going to websites now really to compare vendors and to make buying decisions. And they're hitting more in the middle of the funnel than in the top of the funnel. Now, the top of the funnel is still important because it's what's fueling those AI overviews and ChatGPT's outputs and that kind of thing. And if you're not putting out that educational content, your competitors will be, and they'll be the ones cited in those outputs. Also, this traffic coming in from AI, if you take the initiative to click on something in an AI overview, you're really interested in it, or you want to learn more about it. You want to dig deeper into it. And that's why we're seeing across the board with clients, people that are coming from AI, they're spending longer on the website. They're engaging at higher rates. We're not quite seeing demos being booked and things like, it's not going quite that far, but the AI is sending people to the types of content that we want people to visit. We want people to read those case studies. We want them to visit a demo video page. We want them to visit a pricing page, those types of things. And while blog traffic is down, the pages that matter, those are getting more and more engagement. And when you look at it overall, yes, traffic is down, but the traffic that we're seeing is more of the right traffic. It's not just those random searchers, because the random searchers are getting their answers from Google. They're getting their answers from ChatGPT. So, you have much more intent of the people coming onto your website, which when clients think about it that way, it's a giant sigh of relief, because towards the beginning of the year, it was them having to explain up the chain of command. Why is traffic down 20% or 50% or whatever it is? This major panic has kind of got a little bit of a silver lining to it.
Well, we've definitely seen this year that huge shift in buyer behavior for B2B buyers doing their, vendor shortlisting using ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini. And so the zero-click behavior that you've had. And from a marketing perspective, or specifically SEO, we've seen the rise of GEO, generative engine optimization. Some people call it answer engine optimization. It's the same thing. It's an extension of SEO. And some emerging best practices there about how do brands improve their visibility and preference within the prompt responses. There are now a number of different tools that have really launched this year to measure that visibility. We partnered with a couple of them, Scrunch and Gumshoe. Shout out to those guys, because you've got to establish a baseline. Like, where are we and what can we do? And we're going to take some actions. Did it have any impact? That plays into PR. It plays into content. It plays into SEO. It plays into affiliate. It plays into influencer marketing. How do we improve our visibility there? Because for those buyers, if you're not on that list, you're not coming up, you might never know, and you might not get a chance to sell. And so the game has shifted. And so I think this year has shown, okay, everyone's sort of dealing with the shock of buyers have changed, and then sort of getting their feet under them with, all right, where are we at? For 2026, we are seeing companies now really get much more aggressive with GEO as they go, okay, this is getting funded. I mean, even in the last couple of weeks, it's really accelerated. So I think it's game on for 2026 when it comes to GEO.
That zero-click behavior you described earlier isn't my specialty, right? But when I am in these presentations that we do internally and I see the data, it strikes me how unmistakable the trend is. It's one of the few trends I've seen in marketing where there's just really no argument about what the data is saying. The click behavior is just dropping off a cliff. It's not like a matter of 5% down or 10% down and you're trying to make more of it than it necessarily means. And that's typically how most phenomena in the world don't change that fast. So it does not surprise me under the circumstances that clients are reacting the way they are, because it's a 4-alarm fire.
Well, no one wants to get a question from their CEO or their board of, what are we doing about AI search, and not having an answer to that question. I mean, that's a situation that strikes fear in the hearts of our clients. And, we look at the data all the time and we can see the clients that have an actual GEO strategy. The difference is enormous versus the ones who are just kind of winging it, maybe doing a best practice here and there. It's dramatic, and 2025 has really been the wild, wild west. I feel like we spent the entire year all just trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and it was changing so quickly, and traffic was going down, down, down. We had to figure out something, and even having any insight into impressions or mentions or citations, I mean, that's still so much in its infancy. And we've been talking about drops in traffic for almost a year now. Marketers had a very, very stressful 2025 trying to figure this out. We saw it in our own content. Anything that we put out, blog posts or emails or organic social, anything about GEO, people just ate it up because they're all just trying to figure out, what is going on? What do I do? And when I get a question from the CEO or the board, how do I answer it?
Yes, that was hard because the visibility, the monitoring tools were not good and they were not consistent. And we spoke to several of them. You just couldn't. I was like, I can't put this in front of my client because you just can't answer the questions. And no one could answer. In fairness to them, no one could answer. We're like, they don't know because everybody's search history is different. And, the weights change. And we're like, how are you even dealing with these fundamental questions? Now they're starting to kind of move towards that. And you saw Adobe buy SEMrush just recently as a mark of the importance of Adobe obviously thinks this is a trend that's here to stay. And they're obviously building websites. And so you need to measure the performance there. So, yeah. The measurement is there. I still think we're at the really early stages of best practices to change your visibility, because we've found a few tactics and now everyone's like, oh, I'm going to put a little page on my website that says, all the different details about my company because Winter did it. And so therefore we're all going to do it. And this sort of herd mentality, because you don't want to miss out, because the gains there are so short-lived because everyone's being so responsive to it that you're going to get there really quick. But I think that will start to settle.
I don't think it's going to start to settle down. I think everybody's still terrified. I think it's you being wishful thinking. I mean, like that Winter page. I mean, clients were like, the holy grail, this Winter page, we have to have one, and now we're starting to see clickable prompts in the footer next to the social icons. I think it's kind of like the early days of SEO where stuff is going to get deemed black hat versus white hat. We're just not quite there yet. And everybody's just kind of trying to cling on to the life raft as it kind of bobs through the ocean with sharks circling it. It's a bit of panic. And hopefully 2026 will bring a little bit of clarity to everything that's going on.
Maybe. Another huge trend there, Chris, just on this note, has been rage bait marketing. And it wasn't rage bait the word of the year for the Oxford Dictionary, so I feel like rage bait marketing is here. And this is where you do something deliberate to annoy people, to try and get attention.
Right. In some ways, it's the latest manifestation of the classic marketing maxim that all publicity is good publicity. I think it was Chris Hayes, the MSNBC host, who wrote the book, I think it's like The Siren's Call or something like that. And it's all about the attention economy. and how so much of discourse now depends on grabbing people's limited attention. I mean, that's always been important in marketing, but the theory now is that there are so many competing voices that are so easily accessible and in some cases getting shoved in people's faces algorithmically. The highest, biggest challenge for a marketing team, in theory, especially when the company is small and trying to break through and doesn't have a lot of awareness, is simply to get attention by hook or by crook. And so rage bait, this tactic you described, most famously exemplified, I think, by Cluely, which had the motto of cheat at everything, and it got a lot of attention from outraged institutionalists about the implications of technology like this, where the highest best use is to cheat. Do we want to create a culture of cheaters, right? But the controversy that Cluely kicked up was perceived to be really effective, attracted funding, got funding from Andreessen. And interesting enough, at Disrupt this year, the CEO Cluely admitted we're seeing diminishing returns now insofar as, we might have gotten ahead marketing-wise of what we can deliver in terms of product. We have a relatively undifferentiated product. We're facing a lot of competition, and we might have gotten over our skis a bit with our marketing. Or that was the implication of the write-up on TechCrunch.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So there was a lot of debate toward the end of the year about the effectiveness of rage bait as a tactic. It was really interesting to me is that a lot of this conversation happened in the sort of Y Combinator ecosystem on message boards and on Medium blogs and places like TBPN, Silicon Valley's hot new podcast / Sports Center style show for the Valley. It was really interesting to see that even within this community, which is very innovation forward, and within even the Y Combinator community, where you get the sense that the batches were, if not actively encouraged, it was at least sort of put out there as a possible tactic that these companies might want to use, that there was even a divide within that community. If you look at the message boards, but with the somewhat older, more established people who've been through a cycle or two, putting the brakes on, saying like, maybe we don't want to go quite so hard on this whole rage baiting thing. But you'd see some of the younger founders saying, no, that's just what we need to do now. That this is the world we live in, and we're just doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, we're all in. We've got everything to lose if we don't get attention, because we'll just be irrelevant. So whatever we can do to get the attention, then some subset of that attention could potentially turn into repeatable customers, as long as we got the right, we're in the right area. We did a whole show about this where we broke it down for those that want to get into it. But if you can get it right, I like the risk taking. I like the creativity to kind of, if you can get people, you've got to grab emotions. Nothing is, spreads more virally than rage. I guess they're sort of using the algorithms their advantage. So I like the boldness and creativity, but of course, sort of the PR person in me worries about the reputation and the longevity of it. But, maybe we just need to get over that. But I certainly, for an early stage company.
I also think, in fairness to a lot of these companies, that rage bait is used pretty broadly now to cover just about anything that is unusual or controversial. I think rage bait, strictly speaking, is we want people to dislike us because at least then we're on their minds.
Like those artisan ads that, like don't hire humans that they pasted everywhere. Okay, we talked about billboard advertising. We covered this a little bit, but at least you've heard of artisan now and you have an opinion, and so they've got into your head.
Yeah, that's right. That's the theory. But I think a lot of tactics that would just have been perceived as creative or adversarial in the past, would Salesforce's no software campaign have been rage bait? I don't think even at the time, but that kind of big swing, that kind of adversarial approach, I think sometimes gets lumped in with rage bait now, when it really is, to my mind, a qualitatively separate thing.
One of the final stories of the year, there's so many, it's sort of hard to choose from, was, Chris, you'll like this, was that Meta sort of cutting back on its Reality Labs investment. And Reality Labs was the 3D sort of diverse initiative that Mark Zuckerberg had been trying to sort of take over. Those in the industry have been for a long time not wanting Facebook to take over the metaverse, but they bought Oculus, and he had placed a big bet, multi-billion, did I see here, $30 billion on this? Huge bet, which, all play to Mark Zuckerberg. When he sees an opportunity, he goes all for it, because if the metaverse had become a thing, they would have been right in the heart of it. Maybe it will become a thing one day, but that day is not in the immediate future, it seems.
I have to say, I don't know that we made a prediction about this. We really should have, given our background, right? I mean, we would have been in a good position. But I'm pretty confident that if you had asked me to make a prediction about the metaverse when it was really gathering steam, I think I would have called it. I don't think this ever had a prayer of working. And I say that as someone who has an Oculus Rift, had the first Quest. I have two, as it happens, because one of them didn't work. But, I thought it was good enough to give it another go. And the thing is, for very limited purposes, it is remarkable stuff. But I felt for a long time that VR is just, that AR is going to be transformational. And I think we're already starting to see that. You're starting to see it in military applications. And you're already seeing with the Meta glasses.
The Meta glasses. Have you tried them?
No, I haven't.
Brilliant. Yeah,
I believe it.
They're brilliant. You can play the song. You can take a photo. The sound is really good. I mean, they're really quite something.
So for listeners who aren't familiar with the distinction, for those who are, forgive the excursus here, but virtual reality is a term that's generally applied to a sort of immersive 720-degree experience where you're wearing the bowls like the famous Oculus Rift with a closed background, and everything that you see, everywhere you look, you're seeing the virtual environment. The really big challenges to VR historically there are twofold. One, that you need a lot of data flowing into those glasses quickly. And so the hardware required to make that happen, and the network and the steady network connection, and just all of the technology that's required to make that happen is hard to fit in glasses, even in goggles that are reasonably sized. And so like a screen that delivers a non-blurry experience, a processor that can handle all the polygons you need to make the environment look realistic. And then on top of it, probably the biggest dilemma of all is just typically the way to deliver all those pixels is with a cable, which means you are connected to a high-powered computer. Now, the Oculus Quest VR goggles, it was wireless, but it was relatively limited. And Apple had its own high-end version of this, which also flopped. And I just like VR, the use cases, because you are locked behind these glasses, you can't really move around safely. It's expensive when it looks great, and it's kind of, in some ways, it's underwhelming when it doesn't. So VR has always been kind of betwixt and between. And it's always operated on the assumption, I think, the biggest proponents of VR have always worked on the assumption that what people want is to literally be in another experience. And I think there is some truth to that, but the practical difficulties in delivering that experience are almost insurmountable. I've described the problem with visual fidelity. I've described the problem of being tethered potentially with a long cable if you're delivering high volume graphics that way. But also you're only convincing one sense, which is sight, that you are where you are, and all the other senses are sort of locked down because you're not going to be touching the things that you see. You're not going to be smelling them, hearing, you will be hearing them.
I mean, they've tried to. The audio, they can get some 3D audio, so it sort of sounds
and
like
in some
it's
ways, the audio
you.
is the most impressive.
Right. And they've got those haptic gloves and sort of haptic vests, but you are totally, it is hot in those.
It's hot. They have haptic gloves, but in the real world, this is not a technology that's ready for the mass market, right? But to go to AR, augmented reality, and I have a theory about that, is that it's sort of like a heads-up display on a dashboard or in a jet fighter cockpit where you are seeing the world through glasses generally, or some kind of lens. And then digital readouts are overlaid on the real world. So it's not a completely immersive virtual experience. It's an augmented experience. And that feels to me, especially based on the relative success of the Meta glasses, that feels to me like what the future is going to look like. I mean, maybe Zuckerberg would say, well, it was all worth it just to develop the Meta glasses. That what I've really discovered is that the metaverse is not going to be skeuomorphic. We're not going to be trying to recreate another reality from the ground up. What the metaverse is going to be is a digitally augmented version of the reality we're already living in. That feels much more likely to me.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. This was not a mass market. I mean, the Vision Pro from Apple was a niche product. I think they're going to come out with a cheaper one, or have they even come out with a cheaper one to try and
I
open
feel
it up?
like they kind of punted.
They kind of shelved that. But Meta's now sort of hung up their hat. And for anybody that's tried it, you can do it for 20 minutes and then you're hot and disoriented. It is amazing. It is pretty amazing. I've done a tour of Tutankhamun's tomb with a tour guide who was there specially, and it was just unbelievable. But this is not a mass market product. So I applaud the Meta here for sort of heading off. Maybe they could have cracked this. It'd be great for going for concerts or for movie experiences or what have you. But they've just sort of put the lid on this for now. And I agree with you. We'll probably see the investments in AR, and their glasses on that so far are the Luxottica ones that they've got with Ray-Ban, etc. Pretty amazing. Good stuff. All right. I think it's been a very exciting year. We picked out just a few of the trends there. I'm sure that there were so many that we really missed, and any quick discussion is going to miss some of the big news items. And of course, we didn't want to talk about tariffs or interest rates or those other sort of mega issues that have been affecting us on a day-to-day basis. But it is useful to kind of take a look back so that we can realize just how much change we've all seen in tech marketing and comms this year. It's been enormous. It feels like it's been 10 years.
It really does.
It feels, and yeah, Nicole, we probably will be fast again next year. You're probably right. But listen, thank you both for giving some analysis there. Really enjoyed that, Chris and Nicole. And thank you all for listening. Please drop us a comment and share your opinions about the year too. And we will see you all again next week.